Hey there, this is the ResistorVic podcast. I'm here to get folks thinking about politics as something that's really about regular people like you and me, and to realize that together we can make a difference. I'm Vic Myers. Welcome to The Resistance. It is 11:31 p.m. on Sunday night. I've got work tomorrow and I should be in bed. But something's been off all day long, and I finally figured out what it is, and I've got to get it out of my head. I thought I would, maybe put together a video and maybe try and get it recorded in the morning before work, but it's too much. There's too much to say about what I got to say, so I decided I was just going to do a extra episode of the podcast today. Before I do, I want to answer a question real quick that was sent in. Sand 3M. Oh, Maria. Okay. See, if you look at the bottom of the email, you can see who sent it. Anyway, Maria asks if it's possible, can Trump be removed from office if found criminally involved in the Epstein files? Can the legitimacy of his presidency come into question by actively hiding the truth from the American people so they would vote for him, and therefore the voting was not in good faith? Is this why he's hiding the files? Okay, several questions. All right, real quick. It's not a silly question, as your title said. It may be a silly question. It's not, because one, it's very complicated when it comes to removing the president. Seems simple, but the Supreme Court has made it much more complicated. And people who think they probably know might not know how complicated it is. So, first off, can the legitimacy of his president be called into question? No. Because we knew what kind of a person he was when we voted. And he didn't get voted on. He didn't get voted for. Let me rephrase that. There were those who voted for him. There were those who voted for somebody else. And there were a whole lot more people who didn't vote at all. So, no, you can't. There is no mechanism in our Constitution for saying, well, he lied during the election or he hid something and we didn't have all the information. That's not an option. There's three ways to get rid of a president. One, he resigns or dies. In that case, that person's no longer the president. Two, 25th Amendment. Oh, okay, there's a fourth way. In Trump's case, because he's term limited, there's the three. Passes away or resigns. There's one way. Two, 25th Amendment. Cabinet members all get together and they say, you know what, this guy is not fit. And then that kicks in, he's removed. And then there's so many days where the Congress has to either say, yeah, sorry, buddy, you're not fit. You're not president anymore. Or say, no, he is still the president. And then the third way is impeachment. And that's more complicated than you think, because it used to be, he was impeached twice. And on his second impeachment, the Republicans, their argument for not impeaching somebody who led an insurrection, send a violent mob in to stop the counting of the electoral votes, their justification was that he can be held criminally liable, and this can be done in the courts. We don't have to do this through impeachment. And then what happened? United States Supreme Court turned around and said that a president is immune from just about anything. So we do still have the impeachment. Unfortunately, the Republicans, today's Republicans, have shown that they don't care about the rule of law. They don't care how bad a person is as long as he's got an R behind his name. So, yeah, there's that. I'm starting to see tiny little cracks in the Republicans in Congress, but None of them are big enough to matter. I hope that answers your question, Maria. Now, to the reason I got on tonight. I want to talk about the 3 shootings this weekend. 3 mass shootings, Michigan, North Carolina, and Texas. And here's the detail that stood out to me. All 3 of these shooters were veterans. At least one of them is a confirmed combat veteran. One who claims to be a combat veteran and very well may be, we don't know yet. And the third who's a veteran for sure, but we don't know much about him yet. And I'm not here to have a gun control debate. I'm not here to argue about left versus right. I'm not here to even claim I know exactly why these tragedies happened or what led to them. That's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying it happened because they're veterans. But here's what I know. I know that every time something like this happens, the narrative splits right down the middle. Recent history tells us that Trump and the Republicans are going to somehow try and blame all of this on radical Democrats. That's just what they've been doing, right? And on the left, it's going to jump automatically into semi-automatic weapons and gun laws. And I've said this before. We've been having that debate for 40 stinking years, and it's gone nowhere. There's more and more shootings, more and more funerals, and the debate has never moved us closer to solving the issue. So I'm not engaging in that fight tonight. While the same arguments get recycled, the real story, the one about neglect about veterans and broken promises, is going to slip through the cracks again. So, to be clear, PTSD does not cause mass shootings. Most veterans with PTSD never hurt anybody. Still, I can't help but wonder if the lack of care, the constant financial strain, and the abandonment of our veterans played a role in what we saw this weekend. Because when you look at it, the truth is we send people off to war and we make promises to take care of them when they come home, and then we fail them. That's the conversation I want to have. We fail them. We've been failing them for every war that this government gets involved in, going all the way back to the beginning. So let's take a minute and look at what actually happened this weekend. In Michigan, a man drove his truck into a Mormon church in Grand Blanc, I don't know how you say it, township, opened fire and set the building on fire. 4 people were killed, 8 were wounded. The shooter was a former Marine, a confirmed combat veteran of the Iraq and Afghanistan wars. And in North Carolina, a man on a boat opened fire into a waterfront bar in Southport. 3 people have died, 5 were wounded. The shooter claims to be a combat veteran and has spoken publicly about suffering from PTSD. In Texas, at the Kickapoo Lucky Eagle Casino, another shooter opened fire during a crowded raffle event. 2 people were killed, 5 were critically injured. The shooter's military background is less clear, but he too is a veteran. So we've got 3 mass shootings, 3 veterans, 1 confirmed combat veteran, another claiming combat service, and a third still being figured out. And that's been standing out to me all weekend. It's frankly kept me from being able to focus on a lot of things that I should have been focusing on. It did also make me think about years ago when my dad was in the VA. He was in the hospital for a heart valve transplant, or replacement, And he kept telling me that I needed to sign up for my VA healthcare benefits. He wanted me to have that safety net. But I wouldn't do it because at that time, the backlog for combat veterans from the Iraq and Afghanistan wars was tremendous. People were waiting sometimes over a year or 2 just to get an appointment to get the care that they needed. The backlog was that enormous. So we had people who had been in combat were struggling to get basic service. And here was me, my military service doesn't compare to theirs. And I didn't want to take resources away from those veterans. Figured they need it more. I'll figure out my own health care. So I carried that decision around for years, and recently, having some issues of my own, I finally decided to walk into a VA to see what I even qualified for. Don't know if I'm ever going to find out because, it could take who knows how long. But anyway, that's another story. But that hesitation was always there because I believe deep down the system was too overwhelmed for me to ask about care that could take away from somebody else. And that's not how it's supposed to be. Veterans, and I'm not talking about me now, but veterans should never have to feel like getting care is taking away care from somebody else. But that's what the scarcity mindset the backlog has created. It's made us question whether we deserve the very care that we were promised. And that backlog that I worried about years ago is back again. It's different. It's got a different shape, but it's the same problem. Right now, the Veterans Administration is cutting tens of thousands of jobs. The original plan was to eliminate as many as 70 or 80,000 positions. But after some pushback both in and outside of the VA, that number has come down to around 30,000. That's doctors, nurses, mental health professionals, all the support staff, suicide hotlines. The VA's own watchdog has already warned that 94% of VA hospitals face severe staffing shortages. Psychology is the biggest area, the number one area where veterans can't get their appointments. That means that PTSD counseling, crisis support, suicide prevention are stretched thinner than ever. So on top of that, privatization is accelerating. More veterans are being sent to outside providers under what they call community care. Now, I get that for some people, especially in rural areas like mine, being able to go to the local doctor instead of traveling to Pueblo or Denver or Albuquerque, it's better for some of us. But the vast majority of the veterans aren't in that situation. The privatization is accelerating, and the administration is calling it choice and efficiency. Well, what it really does is it's draining resources from the VA system. It weakens the hospitals that specialize in the veterans' needs, and it's sending billions of taxpayer dollars into private contractors like TriWest and Optum. It's the same cycle I saw back when my dad was in the VA, urging me to sign up. Veterans are feeling like there isn't enough care to go around, like every appointment is a zero-sum game, only now it's not just backlogs. It's deliberate cuts and shortages and a slow bleed of resources into private profit. So let's talk about what privatization really means. It means the money that should go to veteran hospitals, veteran doctors, veteran mental health care gets rerouted into private corporations. Take the Veterans Choice Program that started a decade ago. Since 2014, the VA has spent more than $10 billion through that program. $10 billion. And nearly $2 billion of that, that's 20%, has gone straight into overhead, administrative fees, and more importantly, profits for contractors like TriWest Healthcare Alliance and HealthNet. That's money that's never even touched a veteran. Today, it's TriWest and Optum, a division of United Health, Luigi's favorite healthcare company, running the community care system. They're paid to manage networks and push veterans into private hospitals and clinics. In 2018, the cost of reimbursing private providers was about $15 billion. And by 2023, it had almost doubled to $28 billion. That's billions of tax dollars leaving the VA system, dollars that could have hired more psychologists, kept suicide hotlines fully staffed, or reduced wait times for the veterans I was worried about back when my dad was trying to get me to sign up. He wanted me to have health care, but in my head, I thought enrolling meant taking resources away from combat vets who needed it more. And we're doing it again. And Republicans have been trying for decades to completely privatize VA healthcare. They've pushed it forward piece by piece, just one increment at a time. And now look at Trump. He's like, yeah, my oligarch friends really need that money. Democrats, for all their flaws, have generally fought against it, working to keep the care inside the VA system where it belongs. This administration and the Republicans, they call it choice. They call it efficiency. But the real story is all about profit. These aren't government doctors in veteran hospitals. These are oligarchs and healthcare corporations turning veterans into revenue streams. And it goes further than that. Once veterans are pushed into private networks, their care isn't just in the hands of doctors. It's in the hands of corporations that use AI to decide whether or not their claims should even be paid. And we've already seen cases where algorithms are used to deny coverage. That's what happens when profit takes priority over people. That's why our general healthcare system is such a mess. Veterans aren't patients in that model. They're line items on a balance sheet. Now, I'm not saying that PTS caused these shootings. I'm not saying being a veteran explains them. But I can't ignore the fact that these 3 shootings happened and they're all veterans. I can't ignore the system that left these men behind. Now, with the same cycle repeating, and tens of thousands of VA jobs being cut, mental health workers being laid off, billions of taxpayer dollars siphoned into private corporations, how was this okay? The promise that they made us was simple. You serve and we take care of you. But what we're getting instead, what the veterans are getting instead, is scarcity, privatization, in a word, betrayal. That's what I see when I look at these shootings, not just tragedy, but a warning. If we keep starving the system, if we keep letting politicians sell off veterans' care to their friends, then more people are going to slip through the cracks. More families are going to be left behind. And the promises that we made to those who serve, they're going to be even more meaningless. I often have people say to me, "Thank you for your service." Quite frankly, more often than not, when somebody says that to me, it kind of pisses me off. And if the person who's saying it to me is a veteran and I know that, then I don't mind. I feel some camaraderie. But if the person who's saying it isn't a veteran, or I have no idea if they're a veteran, then I kind of get pissed off because it just sounds so hollow. I look at how America is allowing our veterans to be treated. I look at our politicians who love to grab a veteran when it's campaign time and then cut their health care after the election. So please don't thank me for my service. If you want to show all the veterans in America that you really appreciate our service, then what you do is you actually prove your gratitude, and you prove it by making veteran care a priority when you vote for somebody. Everybody says, "Oh yeah, veterans are important. We love our veterans. Got to back our veterans. Stand up for our veterans." Name the cliche. Everybody's got one about how much they love our veterans. And then when the elections roll around, they don't vote on veterans issues. Excuse me, veterans do, but nobody else does. And for those who are going to come into my comments and say, "But the veterans voted for Trump." Yeah, a lot of them did. If you look at the entire spectrum of veterans, then yeah, a lot of them did. But if you look at the combat veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan and all of the other places that we've been in the last 25 years, not so much. I don't believe, I read the statistics the other day, and I'm not going to say with certainty, but I seem to recall that a majority of veterans did not vote for Trump when you take it down to the combat veterans over the last 25 years. And when you see a politician, for instance, Ty Winter, my state representative, this son of a bitch, he loves to talk about how he loves our veterans. He'll wrap himself in the flag and he'll grab one for a photo shoot, and he'll really talk up strong about how he loves our veterans. But then this last session in the legislature, he led all of the Republicans in the state legislature to turn their backs, not figuratively, but literally turn around and show their backs to a group of veterans who are addressing the Colorado legislature about the J6 pardons and how it makes them feel. I got the picture somewhere on my computer. I intend on using it frequently during this next election. When you see politicians who disrespect our veterans like that, one, let them know that's not okay. And two, never vote for those assholes again. I feel better. There you have it, folks. I came and said what I had to say. Now maybe I can get to sleep tonight. Thanks for making me a part of your day. Well, folks, looks like we're back at the barn and it's time to call it a day. I sure do appreciate you spending your time with me. If you want to help keep this podcast going by supporting me, you can get a paid subscription on Substack, where I'm ResistorVic. Or if you're the type that'd rather go to PayPal, I'm also ResistorVic@gmail.com. Thanks again.